Go. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this week's NACDA virtual programming series. I'm Bob Vecchione, NACDA CEO, and I trust you're all staying safe and healthy. As you may know, over the last few weeks, we have covered topics on how to prepare yourself for athletic department leadership and what to do during those very important first few months in the chair. Once those few months of exploration and assimilation are behind you, you can then begin to shift the focus to building your team and implementing your vision for the department. Today's session, titled Optimizing Culture Through Your Leadership Team, will provide examples for creating, developing, and growing culture within your department. This afternoon, we're pleased to have Ross Bjork, Director of Athletics at Texas A&M University, Dennis Francois, Director of Athletics at Central Washington University, and Sherryta Freeman, Director of Athletics at Lafayette College, join us to provide their insights into how they establish culture within their respective departments and teams. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all of our live attendees that you just have to use that little button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask any questions. Anytime during the session, we'll be able to log in and get your questions answered. And further, I would like to also thank our sponsor of today's session, Dynamic Pricing Partners, for their involvement with NACDA. Partnering with over 75 sports and entertainment properties, Dynamic Pricing Partners are experts in pricing, predicting pace of sale, and distributing inventory across multiple channels. Their experience, technology, and data ensures their partners exceed their goals and maintain brand integrity across all platforms. To learn more about Dynamic Pricing Partners, please visit dynamicpricingpartners.com. Dennis, Sherryta, and Ross, thank you again for being with us today. And Ross, it's all up to you. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate the introduction, and really hats off to NACDA for really adapting during this virtual time. I know for me, I've been to every NACDA convention since 1997, and so I guess this still counts. Even though we're not physically together, I'll count this as attending NACDA for 2020. So I really applaud NACDA for doing this. And originally, Sherryta, Dennis, and myself were going to be on a panel during the Mentoring Institute, and Desiree Reed Francois is supposed to be the moderator of the entire Mentoring Institute. And so I guess because we're virtual, that duty falls to me during this session. So what we're going to do, obviously we're talking about culture through leadership, but this is really geared towards that senior level administrator who's maybe one or two steps away from becoming an athletic director, and really kind of packing that toolbox with the necessary tools and skills and experience to become a director of athletics. And so what we're going to do is we'll have all three of us cover three topic areas: leadership, our leadership journey, talking about culture, building culture within our department, and then building trust and inclusiveness. Those three topics. And then if there's Q&A that comes up, Katie will help us moderate the Q&A, or we can wait and do the Q&A at the end. But we want this to be fun. We want it to be interactive. I see there's maybe 240 or so participants. So we appreciate everyone joining us today. And so to cover the first topic, the leadership journey of all of us, we're going to go ladies first and have Sherryta kick us off here.
Perfect. Thank you, Ross. And I will echo your sentiments in terms of just being appreciative of the opportunity to be able to share my thoughts to the NACDA community. Certainly would have liked to have been able to be on the panel in person, but this is just fine as well. When I think about my leadership journey, I think about my path and the leaders that I had an opportunity to learn from, and how it has established, my leadership style to this day. So I'll walk through my pathway a little bit and talk a little bit about what I've learned, or what leadership and cultural elements I've been able to pull in order to establish myself as a leader at Lafayette College. I'll start with Dartmouth, which was certainly an early part of my career. But there, as the assistant to intercollegiate programs and as the assistant AD for compliance, I learned more of a team approach there. I learned how to step in and step up whenever that was needed. I saw everyone contribute, and I wasn't necessarily in a leadership role. So in those parts of your career, it's about learning from the leaders that are around you, being more of an observer of leadership in a way was what it was for me. And I had the opportunity and the fortune to work with some great leaders. I reported directly to Grace Calhoun, who's the athletic director at the University of Pennsylvania, and Josie Harper, who is a longtime athletic director and mentor at Dartmouth. And so I had an opportunity to learn some great insights from the two of them, as well as others within the department. When I moved on to Temple University as the assistant AD for compliance, that was an opportunity for me to start in my own leadership role because I was at that point leading a compliance office there. So there I started to lead by example, leading within a team. I started to develop my collaborative approach to leadership. And I think I was able to do that because I had a great team there. I was a decision maker, but I knew that the folks that were working with me would develop more if they were included. And so feeling like I could share with them, be able to get their insight and their input. Also wanting to make it fun, because I do think as leaders, we have to, create environments where people are learning, but they're enjoying that process. And I was learning too at the same time. So that was really, really important. But giving the team an opportunity to grow and try new things, building confidence in themselves. I think all of those things improve your culture, and certainly those things come from the top down in terms of your leadership. When I transitioned to Penn as the senior associate athletic director, it furthered my leadership and expanded the group that I would oversee. And so there, I think I learned a lot more about trusting your people. Because I wasn't as much hands-on in a particular area in the way that I was at Temple. I learned about having a strategic approach, the importance of communication. And Penn was certainly an opportunity where I had an opportunity to learn about the literature associated with culture and leadership with some of the professional development opportunities that I was able to participate in there. So I think that growth put me in a position to be the athletic director at Lafayette College, which is where I am now. And I operate in a very collaborative way. The ability to be able to have a vision and enthusiasm for what you're trying to accomplish is great. But believing in staff participation is certainly an important aspect of leadership. Letting people do their work, trusting them to do that, holding them accountable. But also just creating an environment where people feel like they're valued and that they have the opportunity to succeed. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Great. Dennis, you want to go next, or?
You bet. Well, I also want to echo Ross and Sherryta's comments and thank NACDA and Bob Becchione and Katie for arranging this. It's truly an honor for me to be on the same stage with Ross and Sherryta. Talking about a very, very important subject and something that continues to evolve and change. My journey's been a little bit of an anomaly, a little bit atypical. I wrestled in college, and that might be part of one of the things. You become very independent in what you do and how you do it. One of the great traits it teaches, but it also can maybe teach some bad traits in terms of that teamwork. You really didn't have to work with the team. It was all, you got to do your part and make sure that you take care of business, and everything else will fall into place. So that's one of the things I've kind of learned over time, and have been told I had a wrestler's mentality. When you're confronted with a problem, you kind of want to take it down and pin them, but you learn from those things. And but for me, my journey really was not in an athletic department. It was I went on to get my PhD, and I wanted to be a college professor. So I did that for 8 years prior to getting back into administration. I did coach at the college level for a number of years, but 8 years in higher education as a professor. And I think what that taught me a lot about is just kind of more of the theory based approach in terms of all the different leadership styles and learning about culture and business organizations and such, and really what makes them successful and what doesn't. I was afforded a great opportunity at the university I was working at in New Mexico to serve as the interim athletic director, and I did that for a year and a half. So unlike most people, I didn't have a lot of people that were, mentors in terms of athletic directors that I served under, and you learn some hard lessons that way, but you also learn to be a little bit more collaborative and seek more input. Probably the things that I enjoy most about NACDA and even our conference AD meetings, it's not necessarily what happens in those meetings, it's the side conversations and everything else that happens that you learn, able to pick somebody's brain a little bit more. But the sessions too are outstanding and give you a pretty wide variety of approach to what to do and what not to do. But after New Mexico, I served as the athletic director at Southern Oregon University, and was there for 3.5 years. And during that time was probably the first time that I really realized how important it is to have a collaborative approach and be more inclusive in terms of what views you're going to bring in. And you're looking at the history of an organization, taking into that account in terms of what types of decisions you make. But it was a great experience in there, and then had an opportunity to go to Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm an Iowa native, so it was coming home for me, but served under Sandy Hatfield Club there, and really learned a lot because of a great administrative team and the senior staff there. I became much more probably humanistic during that time, and it wasn't quite business, and those are the things that you kind of learn along that way. As we all know, we learn many times as much what not to do than what to do. And I think those are the things, the lessons that you take with you. And then the last 7 years I've been here at Central Washington University, and really trying to develop a culture here. And I think we have done a good job, but it's a never-ending job, as we know, to constantly reinforce and better your culture and your organizational health. But through that process, you're surrounding yourself with great people, people that tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear, and how critical that is, and having that open, healthy conflict behind closed doors, but have a unified front when you go beyond those doors. And been very fortunate to be blessed here to have a great senior staff, but also administration, a president that truly believes in what intercollegiate athletics does, not only for the student athlete and what life skills it develops, but also what potential intercollegiate athletics has for a university in developing that school pride and spirit. So it's been an atypical journey, as I noted before, but these type of sessions I think are very valuable because of you'll learn from so many different people and the approaches they've had and what's worked and what has not.
Great. Thanks, Dennis and Sherryta. Very similar to Dennis in terms of the student athlete perspective. I couldn't wrestle because I didn't want the ear problem. I won't call what that is named, but you know what I'm talking about, Dennis. And you guys have wrestling, Sherryta? So you know what I'm talking about. The ears, cauliflower ears.
We don't
Okay.
we don't at Lafayette,
Okay.
but we did at Penn, and so I know what you're talking about.
Okay. So I played fullback in college, and very similar approach, Dennis, that let's just hit this head on, right? Whatever the issue is, let's tackle it. Let's deal with it. Let's confront it. Let's take it as an opportunity, whatever it might be. So very similar style, I think, to what you described, of just straight ahead mentality. And I'm one of those people that believe that leaders emerge. And if you heard Sherryta and Dennis talk about that, they both talked about grabbing different things from their journey and applying it to how they lead their athletic department now. And I think that's the key thing. And that's definitely what I've done. I've been fortunate to be around some great leaders, some icons, if you will, in college athletics, and be able to grab principles and grab philosophies and tactics and strategies, and you kind of beg, borrow, and steal along the way, and then you adapt it to your own style as you emerge as well. But I think we all emerge through our journey. We all take things in. And the key thing that I think we're talking to that next generation, those rising stars, is that it's never too late to formulate what your leadership style is. And I would encourage everyone to start now, because you can't think about your leadership style when you walk in that interview room. It's too late. You need to be thinking about that 3, 5, 7, 10 years before you have an opportunity to become an athletic director, or even to interview for an athletic director job. My leadership philosophy is really situational based. We all get that question. Will you tell me what type of leader you are? Well, you know what? Tell me what the situation is, and then I'll tell you what type of leadership approach that I'll take to that situation. Because as we know, sometimes we have to be really firm. Sometimes we may have to put our arm around someone and lead them through a challenging situation. Sometimes we just have to be the one to make the decision by ourselves. No one else can make the decision except the athletic director. Sometimes it has to be a collaborative approach. And so we all are going to get that question if we haven't already. Tell me what type of leader you are. And I think the best answer for me anyway, my philosophy is the situation will dictate the response. Now, our values remain the same. Our principles remain the same. Our integrity never changes. It's not situational ethics, it's situational leadership. And I think there's a big difference. I think when we control our self-awareness, when we control our emotions, then I believe that's when we perform to the best of our ability with our leadership style. As we're going through these challenges right now, and we'll probably get to some of this, how are we doing this during our recent challenges? I always say that there's no manual. We can't look up on page 92 in the athletic director manual, because there is no athletic director manual, and say, this is how you deal with social unrest. This is how you deal with a global pandemic, right? Part of being a leader is you have to gather as much information. You have to be well informed. You have to be very, very organized in your approach. You have to create that culture, which we'll talk about here in a second. A lot of times you can't be too emotional. We have a saying, never too high, never too low. You know, if I go running down the hallway and I'm the one, you know, out of control and panicked and freaking out, well, that gives everyone else permission to do the same. And so I have to be in utmost control. I have to control my emotions. Does that mean we don't get angry? We don't get mad? Of course, right? We're all human. We have those emotions, but you probably have some outlets where you need to vent, maybe in more of a private setting. No whining, no complaining, no excuses. That came from legendary coach John Wooden. And I was able to be around him when I was at UCLA for 5 years. And to me, that's a standard that leaders have to have. No whining, no complaining, no excuses in everything that we go through. And in a lot of ways, for our young people, this is what I talk to our students about a lot, is that we've made leadership almost too big. How do we get leadership back to being about helping others, being about being thoughtful, being kind, understanding, being inclusive? It's not about the corner office. It's not about how much money we make. It's not about how we dress. Dennis has a sport coat on today. So does Sherryta. I don't. I have a golf shirt on, but we can still be a leader, right? It doesn't matter the title. It matters, are we here to serve? And that's the impression in leadership that I try to follow. So that's the leadership journey section. Now we're going to switch to culture. And if you guys don't mind, I'll go first. We'll kind of switch it up, and then we'll go to Dennis, and then Sherryta can close us on the culture piece. Culture, to me, is one of those aspects of leadership organizations that it's hard to really put your finger on it. But you know it when you see it, and then you also know it when you don't have it. You know it when it's broken. And it may reveal itself more when it's broken than when it's actually working. Because when it's working, maybe people don't really even talk about it. It just happens organically, it happens naturally. And so culture, in my mind, is doing all the little things to make the big things happen. And it's It's daily, it's hourly, it's minute by minute, it's constant communication of our culture. We have to always be thinking about how to foster a positive culture. We also know that we have to make sure that we have the right staff. This is part of this session, is talking about leading and culture through our staff, is that I can't be everywhere as the athletic director. There's no way. We have a big place. We have one of the largest universities in the country, acreage wise. So we're spread out. We have 320 athletic department staff members, including our athletic foundation, our 12th man foundation staff. There's no way that I can be everywhere. And so do we have the right team of coaches and administrators that see things the same way? They don't have to agree by any means, but the values, the culture, the systems, all those type of things, we need to make sure that we have the right staff. Every single year, I've done this every single year that I've been an athletic director. It started back at Western Kentucky back in the spring of 2010. And every year I do this when I start a job, and I do it every year around August when we kick off the academic year, is I hand out a sheet of paper, and it's about 2.5, 3 pages. And I call it points to remember. And it goes over all kinds of variables in terms of my philosophy. It covers things like, make sure you take a vacation. It covers things like customer service. It covers things like integrity. It covers things like loyalty. It covers things like excellence. We want to win. We're at Texas A&M. We should be one of the best athletic departments in the country. And so we hand this out. And last year I handed it out in August. So I had started about a month before that here at A&M. I did the same thing for 7 years at Ole Miss, and I did it every single August. And it was a great way to just remind staff if there's something that, man, I'm not sure why we do this, or I'm not sure what his philosophy is, or come May or June, I'm really burned out. Can I take vacation? Well, you know what? The boss, the athletic director, the person in charge said to make sure that you take vacation. And so we want people to understand that they need time away. So we hand that out. We talk through it. And the most really proudful moment for me is when I go in someone's office and they've got that thumbtacked on their bulletin board, or they've got it taped on their desk, or because that means that people are paying attention. They want things like that. They want to be informed. And so we try to do that. So culture, I think, is daily habits, actions, values, visibility, that whole management by walking around, showing people that you care, and doing it on a very consistent and organic basis. So that's the culture piece. So we're going to Dennis next, right? Yep. We'll switch it up and go to Dennis.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we did here at Central really to develop, I think, the culture that we are in right now is something that maybe a lot of our staff at the very beginning thought was a little bit hokey, to be honest. They probably thought that what the exercises we did, and we had a lot of longtime staff, people that have been here 20 plus years, and AD that retired after 12 years, Jack Bishop, and really weathered some big storms here in terms of the 08-09 economy, and had to reduce our sport offerings as well. So really did a great job of keeping our department where it was. But I knew that we needed to develop exactly what you said, Ross, one of those things that is a little bit intangible, and you know it when it's there and when it's not there. And the thing that I look back on and reflect on here is that first 2 or 3 months that I was on the job, we spent probably 2 months with all of our head coaches, all of our directors, top level directors, but even solicited input from all of our department about what our core values were going to be. And we had a strategic plan. I found it in the files, and I asked people what our core values were, and nobody knew what they were. And so that kind of told me that we weren't really operating that way in terms of guiding principles and such. So we spent about 2 months identifying what those core values were. And that was some good heated debate, and really, challenging people and questioning, why that, what does that mean to you? But after we identified what those were, we defined them. We developed actionable behaviors. So as you probably said, 3 or 4 things in terms of situations where, hey, this is how this core value plays out. And then we developed a guiding principle, for those core values as well. And really what that was, it really was our code of conduct. And that's really what it was. This is how we were going to operate. And I think over time, when people see that you're starting to make decisions based on those core values and you're not going to waver from those, and of course, one of them, of course, is a great positive student athlete experience. And at our university, I always have to remind them that comes with a dollar figure. And not everybody's able to do everything. And I'm very upfront from the beginning that we were going to make larger investments in particular programs, but not at the expense of other student athletes and their experience here at Central. But a lot of those things that we did at the very beginning, and that was developing those core values, identifying what our mission was, and then really what our vision was as a university or as a department. And that vision for us is CW Athletics, a program with which people are proud to be associated. For you English majors out there, that's putting it that way. But and it really starts with, proud to be associated. And that comes back to pride. And that pride has to start with our student athletes. They've got to feel great about their experience here as a student athlete. It doesn't matter if they are a football player, a cross-country runner, a volleyball player, a basketball, softball, whatever the case may be, they've got to feel great about their experience. And once they have great pride and feel great enthusiasm for their department, their team, that starts permeating to other student athletes, to other students, to faculty, staff. When they say, yes, I've got so-and-so in class, wow, she's an excellent student. It's a great communicator when they're going to be gone on a trip. And then all of a sudden you get those allies, and then that pride continues to grow. And that pride continues to grow to our faculty, our administration, our alumni, our fans. And that's really where it starts, though, is that student athlete experience and the pride they have as being a Wildcat student athlete. And so that's our vision statement. And I know the first time I presented it to our president, I remember it very vividly. He goes, pretty simple, isn't it? And I said, yeah, it is, but try to poke a hole in it. And we do. We want people to be proud to be associated with CW Athletics, and they're not going to be proud if our student athletes are in the paper for the wrong reasons. If our coaches are doing things that aren't ethical and with integrity. And so those are the things that of course fans see, donors see, and alumni. When we start making those improvements to facilities and things like that, that just continues to develop and foster that pride in our student athletes, as well as everybody else outside of that. So that for us, in terms of our culture here at Central, that's the things that we've been really fortunate with. But it's also make sure that we identify what those, or the candidates that are going to adhere to those core values. In every interview that we have, I have a 2-3 page sheet that has our vision, our mission, and all of our values and all those things I just talked about. And I slide it across the desk with those candidates and just say, here's what we're all about, and take a look through this and make sure that this is something that you can buy into and you can adhere to. If not, then you're not the right person for the job. And to be honest, we've had those conversations with candidates on campus, and we knew when they left campus that just wasn't a good fit, and sometimes they know it as well. And so it helps attract the right candidates, but it helps also detract the wrong candidates. And I think coaches have that same thing. The culture within their program is going to attract the right student athletes or detract the wrong student athletes. And so that's a very important thing. And you recruit your own problems, not only as coaches, but also as administrators. And you got to make sure you have people that are going to be on board with what you stand for as a university, as a department, and make sure they have buy-in and able to adhere to those core values and become principles in their life.
I think what Dennis and Ross have shared is definitely spot on. And it also makes me think about how, as leaders, and I'll just say that you're constantly learning and evolving in your process as well. So even when you get to the desired seat of being an athletic director, you can still learn from your peers and learn a lot about building culture and your leadership style. And Ross, I love your idea about the reminders at the beginning of the year. That might be one that I end up stealing from you. So we might have to do that here at Lafayette. But some of the things that I'll add, and Dennis talked a little bit about this, is, wanting there to be the sense of pride for your organization. We talk about energy and enthusiasm, and I think that is something that, in our Leopard family, that's something where I want people to have that energy and enthusiasm to participate in their experience, to come to work every single day. And part of that is having intention in developing community of your organization, making sure that there's room for shared exploration and the emergence of new perspectives, and encouraging people to bring those perspectives to you. People have to feel comfortable about contributing. And if you don't have that sense of collaboration or that sense of pride in the organization, you really deter people from bringing their most valuable contributions. I think there also has to be within the culture a sense of transparency and a willingness to accept feedback. I'm constantly telling my staff, and certainly the leadership team that works most closely with me, that I don't have all the answers. So I think part of establishing a strong culture is to make sure that you have that collective voice, and that it's not just about what I think. Certainly there are moments where, as the athletic director, you need to make decisions and deliver those decisions to the group. But I am always talking about there's forever an invitation to be involved in the thought process, to be able to contribute to the thought process for what we do within our athletics department. I also feel like building culture is also very much about building camaraderie and having a family atmosphere where there are opportunities for the staff to engage. Some of it will happen organically, and some of it, might be kind of corny, but honestly, those are the moments where I feel like that staff engagement gives people an opportunity, again, to have that energy and enthusiasm for what's going on campus, for what's going on in the department, to have this willingness to support each other. It warms my heart to see, coaches and whole athletic teams supporting each other. I think those things don't happen overnight. That's something that certainly was established long before I got to Lafayette, but that's part of our culture that I really am proud of, is that our teams support each other. They enjoy going to each other's games, and they're loud and they're cheering and they're wearing all the same shirts. And that's a part of what I think builds certainly a great environment. This past spring, we had staff Olympics. And again, it was one of those things where we put everybody into teams, and we did it virtually because of the quarantine requirements, but it was an opportunity for staff to be put on teams, and we engaged in all of these, funny, silly activities, but it was just a way for us to come together. And I think those opportunities are certainly so important to the process. But your culture has to be aligned with your values as well. And Dennis talked a lot about that. We also had a collective conversation about our mission, vision, and core values. Those conversations, taught me a lot about what Lafayette Athletics is about. Certainly, I had a vision coming into the department, but I needed to hear from my staff about what they believed our core values were, and what our mission was, and how we needed to alter that based on the vision we had and the strategic plan that we have. And that exercise, I think, allowed us to establish a collective approach that we all can get behind, and values that we all believe in, that we can certainly make sure that are permeating throughout our department. The title of our strategic plan at Lafayette is building a championship culture. And that's the strategy for how we're going to approach things. But in order for us to achieve that, the people who are within the organization have to believe in it, have to be enthusiastic about it, and they have to want to achieve those goals. And I feel like we have it, and it's something that, like I think Ross said at the beginning, when you have it, you have it, and when you don't, it's fairly obvious. So we're excited about what we're doing, and certainly the culture that we've built at Lafayette, I think, is something that we'll continue to build upon.
All right, let's take a few minutes and go into the building trust and inclusiveness. And Dennis, we'll let you kick this section off, and then I think we do have some questions that are coming in, so we'll be able to get to those here.
Right. Well, as Sherryta just mentioned, it doesn't happen overnight, and developing that trust within your senior leadership team, especially, is something that is going to take time. But a lot of the same things people said. You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be open to new ideas. You've got to practice a little bit of cognitive dissonance and put away the things that you think are true, and be open to new ideas and different perspectives. So I think that trust is really a big one. Saying it's a mutual bank account between two people that you can't make withdrawals if you haven't made deposits. So being vulnerable and being open is a critical part of that. I think one of the things that we really try to do is, I never have to worry about being the smartest guy in the room. I assure you that. But I got to surround yourself with great people, those people that really tell you, hey, am I thinking right on this? Am I missing something here? And again, those people aren't going to say that right away. And there's some things that I'll never say to my boss, my president. And you've got to be aware as an athletic director that power differential. And I know meetings go differently if I'm not there. And that's just the reality of what life is in terms of that power differential. But you've got to recognize that, and being self-aware is very critical. But when you're looking at a healthy culture and a healthy organization, and where that trust really begins, it has to start with that senior leadership team, and making sure that, there might be disagreement behind closed doors on certain subjects, but when we walk out those doors, we're a united front, and we're always open for more interpretation, more feedback, and come back and be humble enough to say, hey, I think I screwed up on that one, bad decision on my end. But you do that hopefully after you've taken enough input from other people, and to really make that decision. But those are the things that we really work on. And the key there, though, is really having that healthy, constructive conflict. A lot of times people feel that when people disagree on subjects that, we're just not going to bring that up anymore. But you got to continue to chip away at that, and hopefully get into the inner core of some of these issues that people see or are having. And the more you learn, the more you listen, the better decisions you make, but the more trust you have as well. And so really getting to know them, not only what their job is and what they do here at the university, but also them as a person. Talk about their background, their upbringing, because we're all a product of our environment to a degree. And you kind of realize, oh, okay, that's why Dennis thinks this way. He's one of 9 kids and a big family, and wrestled, whatever the case may be. We're all a product of our past, and that influences who we are. And a lot of times those aren't all positive things. Some of those are negative things. And the more self-aware we are, and the more open we are, and the more vulnerable we are to having that input, the more trust that we can develop amongst each other as a team, which is critical. And then we also, I subscribe to a lot of Patrick Lencioni's philosophies, and his number one theme team theory is a really good one. It talks about who is your number one team, and we talk about that with our head coaches, and saying your number one team has to be the senior leadership team, and you as head coaches. That's your number one team. If you are saying things to your student athletes that undermine our university's authority, our authority, and undermine what we're trying to do as a department, then you've kind of created even more conflict, and that's just not a positive thing. But those are some critical things that I think are very important in building that trust. And it's again a mutual bank account, and you can't make withdrawals if you haven't made deposits. And the more open and vulnerable, the more trust you're going to have amongst your staff.
Sherryta, do you
Yeah, I can go
mind
next.
if you want to go next, or do we want to get into the Q&A? We've got 5 questions.
Go for it.
What do you think?
Yeah,
I just don't want to make sure we get everyone.
let's do the questions. That's fine.
Katie?
All right. Well, thank
Are
you
we okay
all
with that?
for, yes, that's great. So thank you all for your insights thus far. And just a reminder for our live attendees that are participating on Zoom with us, feel free to submit your questions for our panelists through that Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar. The first question, a little bit of a two-part question. Discuss how an AD sets and creates culture versus assimilating into a culture, and who sets that culture?
I'll take that one since I just started a new job, and my 1-year anniversary is July the 8th was my first day on the job. To me, it's both. I think you have to bring values and you have to bring a mindset perhaps to a new place, but I also believe that you need to learn and listen, and you need to understand traditions and values. And one of the things that Dennis mentioned is that he had to create a whole set of core values. At Western Kentucky, at Ole Miss, I brought a set of core values. I talked to our senior staff about developing those. We publicize them. Here at Texas A&M University has core values that I absolutely love. And so we don't have to have a separate set of core values for the athletic department because the university already has a high level mindset. And so that's an example. I believe that we have to do a little bit of both. If it's really, really broken, then you may be starting from ground zero in terms of creating that culture. But I think the number one thing that we have to do when we first start is listen and learn, because it's real easy to walk in and say, here's my master plan. Here's what you all need to do. And if you get into it and it's not the right fit, then it's not going to work. And so I think it's a little bit of both.
And I'll just add to, assessing the culture and how important that is. And, I just crossed my 2-year anniversary at Lafayette, and I echo what Ross has said. I think being able to come in and observe and listen and be able to have those conversations with your staff, with your community, with your student athletes about what's working and what isn't is so important. The last thing you want to do is don't want to come in and just change everything because that's just what you think you're supposed to do. One of the things that I found is that there could be, a lot of things that are working exactly the way they should be. And so being able to identify those things and capitalize on that and building off of that is so important. So I think it's definitely a little bit of both.
Remember one of the things Ross said last year at NACDA in one of the sessions, and I think you mentioned something about meeting with one of your staff members, and the staff members, really, you want to meet with me? Why do you want to meet with me? And I think that is really says a lot about Ross and his leadership style, of course, but it also creates that value in every person in every position. And everybody in our department, we always say that everybody has a role, and with that role comes a responsibility. And so for us as leaders, we need to make sure we know that person, and the better we know people, of course, the better we're able to apply that situational leadership, of course, and knowing their strengths and weaknesses and such. But that was very impressive, and I really subscribe to that as well, and making sure that, hey, we know who our custodial staff is, and we're greeting them every day coming in, and all of our student athletes during our student athlete orientation. We bring our custodial staff that are in our facility to that meeting and introduce them and make sure that they know when they drop that wrapper in the hallway, we clean it up, not them. Let's make sure that we do our best to make their job easier. But I don't know who that was, Ross, but I knew that was an impressive thing. And I took away from that was a very positive thing, and realized that it has to be a shared vision. And that culture cannot happen without buy-in from everybody. So, but it is a little bit of both. You can't come in and change things too drastically that are working, and you've got to be able to identify those things that are not. And when you have a good perspective and visit enough people in the department, you can usually find out what things are working and what are not.
Katie, I think the other question was part of that was who sets the culture. To me, obviously the athletic director is the face of it, but I think it's the people in the place who ultimately set the culture. And it can be led and guided by us as the athletic director with the points to remember sheet that I talked about, or having those, one-on-one staff meetings, or Jason Galaska just texted me and said, remind people about taking donuts to the grounds crew. Like, we can do all of those sort of tactics as the athletic director, but I really think it's the people in the place who ultimately set the culture. Katie, do you want to keep keep going?
Absolutely. So on the topic of listening, obviously you all lean on your senior leadership and your leadership teams, but how do you incorporate the input of maybe some of your younger staff and get them to trust and buy into your vision and message?
I can start on that one. One of the things that we have at Lafayette is we have a leadership team, but we also have a management team as well. And I think the objective of that management team was twofold. One, we wanted to make sure we had a wider range of input from our staff. But also, too, I thought it was important for those junior level administrators to have access to me, and not the informal access that they have all of the time where we can engage in those informal conversations in the hallway, but in a meeting setting where they're actually contributing to the thought process. And so for me, I think in creating those opportunities for them to serve on committees or to be a part of a management team where they're having biweekly meetings with the athletic director is important for their input, for them to feel like their feedback and opinions are valued. And then also too, encouraging them to take on additional responsibility where that can happen, working with their supervisors to learn a little bit more about the needs of the department and taking on those challenges is important for them to be a part of the process. And so hopefully that leads to certainly a lot of trust, but also to feeling valued within the organization.
I would say one of the things about, I thought this was a millennial question, so that's good. We don't have to answer that piece of it. I think one of the aspects of this part of it is, I think our younger folks need to declare themselves to their leaders and make sure that we understand what their dreams are, what their aspirations are. And then our job, I believe, is to help them, get there. So that could be very formal settings. Can I meet with the athletic director? Can I meet with the deputy athletic directors? When we see folks in the hallway, we can have those informal conversations. Hopefully that's a part of it as well. But first step, I believe, is let us know what you want to do. Let your boss, let your supervisors, let the athletic director know exactly what your aspirations are. So then we can maybe help, guide and map out a roadmap for your future to be hired into that first leadership role that was in that question.
The things we did this past year, and we developed kind of a professional development series for our younger staff, and brought a lot of people in from the university, had different guest speakers come in and visit with them. I think we did it once a month throughout this year, and even did it virtually at the end of the year. But I think that was very valuable for getting that input from them a little bit, but also giving them the best advice we can in terms of exploring their professional opportunities and how to develop themselves personally to be ready for that next job.
So as our next question is, as it relates to core values, how do you balance setting core values of the department versus personal core values as you create those standards?
Dennis, you want to talk about that, since you hit on that pretty good?
Well, you hope definitely that most of those core values that you identify as a department and hold as a department are things that you hold true to yourself as well. I don't think there's probably too many things in there that, for our core values that I could say that I don't, try to subscribe to myself in terms of my personal life. But I also make note that people, hey, we're gonna fall short once in a while, and that happens. And as long as it's not a complete disregard to those values, then you're working to improve and make yourself better, then that's okay. But I think some of the core values that we have, one of them, for instance, is family. And this is a, kind of maybe overused at times, a cliche, but and I actually stole it from my previous institution, expect the best from and the best for each other. And that's really what family is. It's really wanting the best for each other and looking out and maybe telling them when they're not doing things they need to. During our student athlete orientation, it's kind of interesting. I talk about our core values and identify a few, get in deep on a few of them. But I asked our student athletes, how many of you competed with one of your siblings, your brother or sister in a sports team? And, there's a handful of people. And how about in the same sport and same team? And so, yes, there's a few, and I'll pick on one. And I said, well, was there ever a time when you wanted your brother or sister to get injured so you could play in their place? And they're saying, no, not a chance. Well, anytime you hopefully maybe they have a bad game and coach pulls them out and puts you in there, is that kind of what you hope for as well? No, I guess exactly. We would never do that for our own family, but it happens in athletics. And if you can take that same mentality you have for your blood and transfer that into your athletic setting, then that's when you really have family. And are you going to be the person on the end of the bench after you get pulled out with the towel around your head and sulking and not, be the last person up off the bench on a timeout? Or are you going to be that person that cheers that person on that just replaced you, saying, hey, you just saved my butt a little bit in terms of going out there and pulling it together for the team. So those are the things that you hope to have in your own family as well. And I think that transferability is important for people. And when they leave here, hopefully over the course of 4 or 5 years, they take those values with them. And, service, for instance, and the things that we try to do in terms of our service projects on campus and in our community, hopefully when they leave here, they'll realize the value of service. And when they get into their own community, they'll be given back as well. And so hopefully those core values do transfer into their real life as well.
Great. So our next question, and you all hit a little bit on your leadership styles and building that leadership style. So again, a two-part question. First part, prior to stepping into an AD role, what were some of the things that you did to reflect upon and explore your leadership style? And part two, are there books or authors that you all use to help formulate your leadership styles and department dynamics?
I'll take the first part of that question. And hopefully you're around leaders in a place who allows you to grow. And what I mean by that is when you're growing up in college athletics, you're not the athletic director, you're not the deputy, but you can observe and you can learn. And hopefully what will happen is they'll allow you to be in the room. Maybe you're sitting in the corner while they're making a decision on who to hire as a coach, or you're in the room when they're building a major project. Whatever it is, I believe that you need to have some sort of in the room experience so you can at least be knowledgeable. The other thing I think is very, very important is that you become a student of the industry of college athletics. We all grow up as really a specialist, and I grew up on the fundraising side, so I was more externally focused. But as I was evolving, I knew that I had to understand academics and compliance and all the internal operations and how to build projects. And I really had to study that because I didn't really work in it on a day-to-day basis, but I needed to be educated. I needed to be knowledgeable about it. And so I think those are some things that you can do early on to capture some of that leadership experience and style. Book-wise, I'm a big John Maxwell fan. I know he spoke last year as the keynote at NACDA. I soak up whatever he's teaching, and he's got podcasts and all kinds of books. He just came out with a new book called Leader Shift that he talked about last year. So I'm a big Maxwell fan.
The other piece that I'll add to Ross's comments when thinking about acquiring your leadership style is one of the things that I did, and I mentioned it a little bit in my intro, was, I would study the leaders around me and try to think about whatever decision they were making or how they were communicating a decision, and kind of putting myself in their position to say, would I deliver that message in the same way that they delivered that message? Would I have made the same decision that they made? And it wasn't to second guess anything that the leaders were doing in my department, but it was starting to kind of help me formulate my leadership style and my approach to these various scenarios. And that's how that's how I started to build it. That's how I started to enhance my confidence in being able to feel like I could operate in a leadership role as an athletic director, because I had started to at least imagine in my head how I would go about those things, even if I didn't have a leadership role at the time. And I had been doing that for years in terms of thinking about how I would approach that. One of the things that I would say about leadership in terms of the literature around it, I had the opportunity to engage in a Leadership at Penn program, the Pathway program for the NCAA, and tons of other professional development opportunities. And so there's tons of literature out there. There's the organizational culture book by Edgar Schein, which was a big piece that we went through in the Pathway program. There are leadership materials from Mike Lucime that I read, which was very, very impactful for me in terms of learning about my leadership style and my approach to leading an athletic department.
Yeah, and I think the experiences we have along the way are definitely the ones that are you're going to take as much good as you are bad from different things, and just make those little mental notes and saying, yeah, that was a great delivery, and here's what I'll take with me, and sometimes the opposite. So, and we also realize that you know, you got to get that feedback from people too around you, and say, hey, how'd that come off? You know, when I make talk to our coaches here in just the recent you know, last few weeks, it's been very, very difficult talking, the last few months, I guess, talking about, you know, what's coming up here, and I'm really trying to be open and honest and transparent as possible. And but a lot of that is you get through, you know, when all this kind of broke in terms of the pandemic, I was ferociously reading about every article I could get my hands on, not only about testing and the virus, but also how people were going about it and what's the best way to lead in crisis. And so there's a lot of great things out there. Of course, our NACDA Daily has a lot of those great articles and things, but also, you know, getting outside of your lane a little bit and reading some more of the, you know, medical literature, or, you know, psychology and things like that are a little bit more informing and probably even more challenging to read. But those are things that help you help develop that leadership style. And hey, what do I need to be doing here? Nobody's ever, you know, don't have that guidebook for facing a pandemic, so that's big. The one author I really enjoy reading most is Patrick Lencioni, and one of his latest books a few years ago is The Advantage. It talks about organizational health. Probably maybe one of the best, most simple books I've ever read, but he has a lot of great books, Death by Meeting and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, 5 Temptations of a CEO or Leader, I forget which one it was, but a lot of fables in there, and brings it to real life. And one he just did was the Ideal Team Player, talking about hiring, and hiring humble, hungry, and smart people, and but a lot of great, useful information. And we do a group read as a senior staff every summer, and haven't identified that one yet this year. We've been too busy in these meetings, but every summer that we've done a group read, it's been an enjoyable experience and something we can share out with our coaches as well.
Katie, do we have time for one more question?
We do.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. So the last question, how do you create a positive culture and high morale when some of your teams may struggle athletically?
Great question. Let's see, that's on page 78 of the athletic director manual, right? What I would say is you probably need to dig into the root of the problem. Like, why are so many teams struggling? What is it? Is it some system issue? Is it funding? Is it the wrong people? Probably dig into the root of it. And then I would say there's got to be some positive things that you can pull out, whether it's statistical things or these teams are they're really good on offense, but defense is not. Whatever the issues are, hopefully there's some good data. And then what I would say, and I've always said this as an athletic director, if I don't believe in the programs, and if I can't bring positivity, then who will? And so to me, we have to set that mindset. And that's how I'd go about looking at that challenge that you have. But the belief part, the positivity part, boy, if I can't do it, then how do I expect everyone else to do it? Sherryta, do you have the magic solution for that question?
I don't, but what I will add is that, you know, it takes time. So when I first started, you know, I brought, you know, this idea of a champion's mindset. And that mindset is that you're going to go into each day, every moment, thinking about how you can improve and having that intrinsic motivation to do that and not being told to do it. So that whole concept of the belief part, I think, is so important, to not get bogged down by what we don't have, but to think about what we do have and how each person can contribute to us being better. And so I would like to say that that mindset, as well as just having very, very dedicated people, has allowed us to go from, not winning a whole lot in my first year to having some substantial improvement across, our entire athletics department. And I think part of that is just, we didn't change a whole lot of people and the student athletes are still here. I think part of it was changing the mindset and letting things come to us a little bit more. So certainly happy about that.
I think it definitely starts at the top. You as a leader need to make sure that you're creating that culture that is positive, and that attitude and effort is a big part of that. One of the things that I think we look at and talk about a lot of times is our student athletes take on the mentality of your coach, and coaches will take on the mentality of the athletic director. And if we're negative all the time and critical, and I'm definitely have my fair share of being critical, but you've got to make sure that you set that tone. And I know our student athletes, and you can kind of tell a little bit when you have a coach that isn't the most positive person, and that culture and that attitude on that team, they take on that same thing. And so I think that is critical. But as a leader, you've got to be optimistic as possible, but you've got to be transparent and communicate as much as you can. And I think when you communicate that things that are not positive news, as long as you're open, honest, and communicate as much as you can with them, they're accepting those things much more so, and they don't look at it as a negative thing. It's like, regardless of what's happening, I'm well informed, I realize the situation, and better than be in the dark and something sprung on you later. So that's a big one, and trying to remain positive during these times, though, is critical for sure.
Great. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Sherryta. I know we had lots of questions that we did not get to, and apologize that we didn't have enough time, but that's what makes these panels great, is there's lots of engagement. People are hungry for content these days around these topics. So Bob, thanks for giving us three the opportunity to be on the panel today.
Hey, Ross, thank you. And Sherryta and Dennis, great job. Great. Three different perspectives. The old adage is there are no new ideas, and you guys typify that. Speaking of communication and speaking of the topics and the need to continue doing things like this, we're going to move to a little different format next week. Kind of a neat topic that we're trying to stay topical at NACDA, and we're going to have a topic for student athlete waivers. We're going to have a discussion on student athlete waivers, pledges and acknowledgments. How do you handle that? What do you do? Rick Hart, our new third VP from SMU, is going to moderate that. Diana Sabo from Ohio State will be with us, and Sheila Wooten from Bloomfield College. So we'll get some unique perspectives there. It should be a great session for interaction and just more education going back and forth with everyone. But again, thank you all so much. Stay safe out there, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Take care.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.